Hi everyone, welcome to a new video. I'm very pleased that I'm able to create this new tutorial for you guys. So, since it is fall, I thought, along with my friend Manuela, who also has an art channel and other channels on YouTube, you should totally check her out for the German speakers out there, that we would be painting this lovely owl with a pumpkin. I will be adding the reference picture that I used in the video, and of course you will see that I did create some modifications. I did not copy the reference picture as is, and I would recommend that unless you're doing studies to not do that, to use the reference picture solely as inspiration and then go from there. So what materials will I be using today? I will be using watercolors. You can use whatever you would prefer. You can use colored pencils, acrylic paint. However, doing this tutorial, I will be telling you how to paint with either gouache or watercolors with translucent painting medium. So let me show you my two palettes. So this dirty one right here has a mixture of Shin-Han Pass hybrid watercolor gouache paints, Schmincke ultra granulated watercolors, and Daniel Smith watercolors. I also use another palette, which is much smaller, of Winsor & Newton professional grade watercolors. Now, you don't need to use the most expensive watercolors that are out there. That's fine. You can use whatever you have. So please, it's the same principle if you're using cheap ones or really expensive ones. I'm also going to be using my art graph. I absolutely love this. And if you're not familiar with what art graph is, it is a water-soluble graphite. And it comes in this large block like this, or you can also get it in pencil form. However, I can't seem to find my graphite pencil. But any water-soluble graphite will do. And the reason why I use this is because it gives that nice grainy texture that I really love. And also I don't use black. So this is one of my darker colors that I do use. Another medium that I'm going to be using is white gouache, because with watercolors, you go from the lightest to darkest. And once you've darkened an area, unless you still have a very wet page, you can lift up some of the watercolor. However, with this, I'm just going to be adding white gouache for those little highlights that I want to add. I'll be using 3 paintbrushes, a large 18, a medium 12, and a small 4. These are Raphael watercolor paintbrushes, but any soft brush that you feel comfortable using works great. Something that I personally love to use, and it's more on the inexpensive side, are the water brushes that you just refill with water. But when I'm home, I actually don't put water in the basin, because if it has too much water and the water starts flowing, that can actually affect how your painting ends up. When it comes to dry mediums, I'm going to be using my Inktense pencils. I love these. And I'm going to be using only 3 shades. The Bark, which is my favorite go-to dark color, Baked Earth, and Persian Red. So grab your supplies and let's start painting. Oh, by the way, I need to share with you guys something that I found in action. Look at this guy. A vampire. I just loved him. I couldn't resist. It's a nutcracker. It's a nutcracker vampire. I mean, come on. It had to come home, and it stays with me on my desk. I love it.
Jetzt bin ich dran.
Hallo. Ich filme.
Ich sehe das gerade nicht. Ich suche echt gerade. Moment.
Sagen, so.
Oh Gott. Hallo.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let you guys know my process and how I approach creating with watercolor lately. What I do is, when I look at the reference picture, which I'm going to be adding now on the left hand side of the page, and what I do is I look at the shapes. I see what general geometrical shapes are composed in the reference picture. So when we look at this one, you can see that there is a circle for the pumpkin, and that there are several geometric shapes that create the owl. We have a half circle or You can even use a circle for the head. You can use a rectangle for the body, just as very rudimentary shapes. And from there, you can add curves and perfect it. So here first, what I'm doing is I'm adding the lightest color to my page, which is yellow. I'm deciding to make this a very warm image, and that's why I use yellow. If I want it to be a cooler image, which when you look at the reference picture, the owl is cooler, you could use a light blue, and this will always shine through and create a warmth or coolness depending on what color you pick within the painting, even when adding more layers. It will always shine through, and that's why I picked the yellow. So create your basic shape, and you can just do this freely at the moment. As you can see, my shape is not perfect. It's too much out towards the left. There's less of a curve. It's too narrow on the right side of the head. So I'm going to be perfecting this as I go. So there really is no need to be worried or be a perfectionist at this stage. This stage is solely about creating shapes, general shapes of what you see in the reference picture. Now, while the page is wet, I will be adding more tones to this yellow. If you want to, you could add these layers later when it has dried off. However, I have decided to just play around with the yellow. I love to see how the watercolor plays on the page. It's just part of my process. It's what I like. So this is how I approach it. So I like to just play around with color while it's still wet and add different tones, so it's just not a flat layer of yellow waiting for it to dry, a flat layer of brown or red or blue, whatever it is. I like to add a bit of a mixture, and here I'm just looking at the shape of the owl and correcting things slightly, adding more of a dark tone, shading, but in a very basic sense, just playing around. It's not flat yellow to me, so that's why I'm adding this volcanic brown. And with the owl in these layers, what I'm mainly using is the volcanic brown, the yellow ochre, and a citrusy yellow. Now, I'm not very concerned with the hump there that I added to the back that's too large. I will be creating a background, and this yellow can play nicely in the background, because if you look at what's around the owl, they're all yellows and greens. They're very vibrant, light colors, so it works perfectly. But what would I do, for example, if I had added a darker tone? Well, I would just use it. I would create a branch or a feather that's sticking out. Not a big deal. You can always find solutions. And so now here I'm just adding the pumpkin in the base, which is a very simplistic shape. It's just a circle. And the nice thing about a pumpkin is that it does not have to be a perfect circle. Not in the slightest. It can be wonky, it can be flat, and also, well, there is a more flatter area at the base. So just look at this, pay attention to the geometric shapes, and we'll go from there. Here I am starting to add in a bit of the art graph. I am creating just a bit of an outline of where the feet are, and I'm adding some of the lines and the darker areas of the feathers solely with the art graph. Still, my page is a bit wet, so it does start to feather a bit, but I'm okay with this because these are not the final details of these parts of the owl, so it doesn't really matter. I will be going over them. However, I do want a bit of a mild sense. Up here, on the other hand, it is a bit darker. I did grab more of the art graph, and so if you are using art graph for the first time, make sure to have a palette where you can, grab some with your brush. You first have to wet your brush to grab some of the graphite and then put it in your palette, and that way you can either dilute it or use it as like the pure form of graphite. If it's the purest form, as you can see here, it's very dark, very, very potent, and it is reactivated with water. Just because it dries doesn't mean that it will remain. No, so you need to be very careful when adding this. I am aware that at this stage, by laying other layers of color on top, it will interact with the graphite. So just be aware of this when using it. You don't necessarily have to do it right now. You could also grab a pencil if your page is dry, and if you don't want to wait very long. What I tend to do is I use a hair dryer to dry my things quicker so that I can work faster. So that's something that you can definitely do. So when it comes to creating the face, I know a lot of people can be very reluctant when drawing symmetrical things on a face. For example, eyes, nose, ears, even the mouth. The best thing that you can do is to create guidelines that help you figure out where you are supposed to draw things and how much space in between things. So if you look at the reference picture, you can see that there is a clear diagonal line from where the beak ends to the corner of the left eye of the bird. This you can draw very lightly on your page when you are starting to sketch out or after initially it has been dry. And that way it is easier for you to figure out where to put things. And as you can see, the bird is kind of angled. I created a different angle for my face because I wanted more of like an illustration type feel. If you are going for a more realistic perspective, you can see that you only see a small portion of the left eye on the bird, while the right eye is completely front face viewing. So that is a perfect circle almost, except for the little overlaying lap of the feathers that create a triangular shape. So just create guidelines. A little square would be ideal, and that way it is much easier to draw perfectly symmetrical features on this owl. Okay guys, well I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye!